I want to take a look at what Victor Davis Hanson has to say, because Victor Davis Hanson has a way of boiling down any controversial topic down into just basic sense, basic common sense, and into a rational explanation of what's happening. So let's take a look at what he says. He's talking to Glenn Beck here.
What do you think this
Yeah,
is really about?
I think it's pretty clear now that Epstein had no talent other than blackmail, and he was not a financier. He was not a captain of finance at all. What he did is he invited very powerful people to his island or his New York home, filmed them, and then he bribed them and he shook them down and said, "I'm going to be your quote unquote financial advisor, and in exchange for that, I'm not going to release all that stuff." And whether there were some
So
pretty
why
big
isn't it
people
being exposed?
because I think it's not. I think there are people in the establishment. I don't know if they partook in his sick things he was doing, but they feel they have some association with him, and they have a finance. They gave him money to invest when there was no reason to hire someone like that. There were much better financial gurus, but he got a $500 million somehow from people who were mainstream establishmentarians on the basis that he was going to blackmail them. I think that's how he made his money, and I think those names are numerous. And I think the Trump administration thought, well, we're going to release this, and there's some crazy people that we don't care about are going to be embarrassed. And then all of a sudden, they got a lot of calls and said, "Why are you doing this? I didn't do this. I went down to the island once. I was on a plane. I didn't touch anybody." And they're saying, "And now you're going to release my name, and I'll be guilt by." I'm not going to. And I think that's what's happening. There's a lot of people who were very powerful that were giving him money or were trafficking with him. Not necessarily all of them engaging in what he was doing, but just the association with him. And I think they're putting pressure on people. I really do.
So that all just sounds extremely plausible to me. I thought that we would take a look because, Victor Davis Hanson there is echoing something we've heard before. I've heard it from, Eric Weinstein had a conversation with him once and started asking him about finance and came to the conclusion that Jeffrey Epstein had no idea what he was talking about and that he was probably some sort of working with intelligence in some way or something. He'd been placed in his position. So I thought we would go through his history a little bit. Epstein began his professional career as a teacher at the Dalton School, despite lacking a college degree. After his dismissal from the school in 1976, he entered the banking and finance sector, working at Bear Stearns, which collapsed in the 2008 financial crisis. Working at Bear Stearns in various roles before starting his own firm. Epstein cultivated an elite social circle and procured many women and children whom he and his associates abused. So he started out as a teacher and was dismissed and then ended up becoming this, genius financier. This guy, half a $500 million. It seems a bit odd. At age 21, Epstein started working in September 1974 as a physics and mathematics teacher. So he's a smart guy for teens at the Dalton School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. So that's the beginning of his career. A very humble start, wouldn't you say? Epstein allegedly showed inappropriate behavior towards underage female students at the time, paying them constant attention and even showing up at a party where young people were drinking, according to a former student. Other former students also saw him flirting with female students. Eventually, Epstein became acquainted with Alan Greenberg, the chief executive officer of Bear Stearns, whose son and daughter were attending the school. Greenberg's daughter, Lynn Kopel, pointed to a parent-teacher conference where Epstein influenced another Dalton parent into advocating for him to Greenberg. In June 1976, after Epstein was dismissed from Dalton for poor performance, Greenberg offered him a job at Bear Stearns. So a guy with no financial experience, it seems a bit strange, doesn't it? So obviously, they formed some sort of acquaintance. as it says here, became friends. And Greenberg hired him at Bear Stearns, even though he had no experience with this. So perhaps there was some shared interest, let's just say. Epstein joined Bear Stearns in 1976 as a low-level junior assistant to a floor trader. He swiftly moved up to become an options trader working in the special products division, and then advised the bank's wealthiest clients, such as Seagram president Edgar Bronfman, on tax mitigation strategies. Jimmy Kane, the bank's later chief executive officer, praised Epstein's skill with wealthy clients and complex products. In 1980, 4 years after joining Bear Stearns, Epstein became a limited partner. Epstein became a limited partner. In 1981, Epstein was asked to leave Bear Stearns for, according to his sworn testimony, being guilty of a Reg D violation. What is that? Regulation D. Any offer to sell securities must either be registered with the United States Security and Exchange Commission or meet certain qualifications to exempt them from such registration. So here's a history of here. He gets a job as a teacher without having qualifications. He gets a job at Bear Stearns and moves up very quickly with no experience. And then he's asked to leave for this violation. Again, you're seeing kind of a weird pattern here, right? In August 1981, Epstein founded his own consulting firm, Intercontinental Assets Group, Inc., which assisted clients recovering stolen money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers. Epstein described his work at this time as being a high-level bounty hunter. He told friends that he worked sometimes as a consultant for governments. All right? You can see the jigsaw puzzles coming into place. The fact that he would describe himself as a high-level bounty hunter tells you something about his ego and the way that he saw his work. Consultant for governments. All right. Epstein also stated to some people at the time that he was an intelligence asset. Intelligence asset. Big piece of the puzzle falling into place. During the 1980s, Epstein possessed an Austrian passport that had his photo, but with a false name. The passport showed his place of residence as Saudi Arabia. In 2017, a former senior White House official reported that Alexander Acosta, the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida, who had handled Epstein's criminal case in 2008, had stated to interviewers of President Donald Trump's first transition team, quote, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone, that Epstein was above his pay grade." Above his pay grade. So, I don't know, it all seems fairly obvious, right? During this period, one of Epstein's clients was the Saudi Arabian businessman Adnan Khashoggi, who was the middleman in transferring American weapons from Israel to Iran as part of the Iran-Contra affair. So he was up to his knees in government business and intelligence business, obviously. Hoffenberg and Epstein refashioned themselves as corporate raiders using Towers Financial as their raiding vessel. What happened to this Towers Financial company? It imploded when it was exposed as one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history, losing over $450 million of its investors' money. Ponzi scheme, which is the kind of thing that maybe a guy who doesn't actually know that much about finance might do, right? And then have it collapse. He left the company in 1989, was never charged for involvement in the massive investor fraud committed. In 1988, while Epstein was still consulting for Hoffenberg, he founded his financial management firm, J. Epstein & Company. The company was said by Epstein to have been formed to manage the assets of clients with more than US $1 billion in net worth, although others have expressed skepticism that he was restrictive of the clients that he took. But if you want to talk about blackmail, about instant access to being able to blackmail people, right? Well, here you go. Manage the assets of clients, very wealthy clients. Work with them directly, invite them out for dinner, maybe invite them to an island or something like that, and boom. By the time that the Bear Stearns Fund began to fail in May 2007, Epstein had begun to negotiate a plea deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office concerning imminent charges for sex with minors. In August 2007, a month after the fund collapsed, the U.S. Attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, entered into direct discussions about the plea agreement. Acosta brokered a lenient deal, according to him, because he had been ordered by higher government officials who told him that Epstein was an individual of importance to the government. So just going through the history here and just the basic facts, right? Like it really does become clear what was happening here. There was blackmail and there was government involvement. He was important to the government. Now, Epstein installed concealed cameras in numerous places on his properties to allegedly record sexual activity with underage girls or prominent people for purposes such as blackmail. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's long-term girlfriend and companion, told a friend that Epstein's private island in the Virgin Islands was completely wired for video, and the friend believed that Maxwell and Epstein were videotaping everyone on the island as an insurance policy. When police raided his Palm Beach residence in 2006, 2 hidden cameras were discovered in his home. It was reported that Epstein's mansion in New York was wired extensively with a video surveillance system. So, what you ended up with Epstein was, 2 parts of the government colliding, right? So you had, I think, obviously the intelligence services, right, being undermined by, DAs essentially. Maria Farmer, an artist who worked for Epstein in 1996, noted that Epstein showed her a media room. Listen to this. All right, this is crazy. Maria Farmer, an artist who worked for Epstein in 1996, noted that Epstein showed her a media room in the New York mansion where there were individuals monitoring the pinhole cameras throughout the house. The media room was accessed through a hidden door. She stated that in the media room, quote, "there were men sitting here, and I looked on the cameras and I saw toilet, toilet, bed, bed, toilet, bed." She added that it was very obvious that they were like monitoring private moments. So how much do you want to bet there was CIA people or contractors or something in that room? I mean, this is just like out of a spy novel, isn't it? And obviously intelligence figures in there, right? It wasn't just Epstein going in there to perv out, right? There were people in there. There were people in there. There were individuals monitoring the cameras throughout the house. If it was just there to perv out on people using the toilet, say, you wouldn't hire a bunch of people to go in and monitor it all. Epstein allegedly lent girls to powerful people to ingratiate himself with them and also gain possible blackmail information. According to the Department of Justice, he kept compact discs locked in his safe in his New York mansion with handwritten labels that included the description, young, and then name plus name. Epstein implied that he had blackmail material. When he told a New York Times reporter in 2018, off the record, that he had dirt on powerful people, including information about their sexual proclivities and recreational drug use. So, I mean, this is all stuff that we've all heard before. I think it's just useful to do a refresher, a little bit of a primer on it all. So let's go back now.
I think it's pretty clear now that Epstein had no talent other than blackmail, and he was not a financier. He was not a captain of finance at all. What he did is he invited very powerful.
So when you look at his unlikely rise, and what was his way in? His way in was Alan Greenberg, right? Very successful, Bear Stearns. He became friends with him through the school. Was that the first blackmail victim? Because would you typically just hire somebody with no experience, right? Somebody who had been fired from a job teaching for being creepy? Not sure. Let's continue.
And I think the Trump administration thought, well, we're going to release this, and there's some crazy people that we don't care about are going to be embarrassed. And then all of a sudden, they got a lot of calls and said, why are you doing this? I didn't do this. I went down to the island once. I was on a plane. I didn't touch anybody. And they're saying, and now you're going to release my name and I'll be guilt by, I'm not going to. And I think that's what's happening.
Now, Victor Davis Hanson is fantastic. I love Victor Davis Hanson. I think he's missing here, I think, the fairly obvious government intelligence connections. I mean, there's a reason why, there was government interference in his sentencing in the first Epstein trial, right? So it seems to me it is totally obvious, right? He was working with the government, a government agency in some capacity. And it was enough for him to get off the hook on multiple occasions. Okay, let's listen to this from Bill O'Reilly.
I talked to President Trump man to man, eye to eye, on St. Patrick's Day about this and the Kennedy files and the King files. It was all one conversation. And he said, and I agree, there are a lot of names associated with Epstein that had nothing to do with Epstein's conduct. They maybe had lunch with him or maybe had some correspondence for one thing or another. If that name gets out, those people are destroyed because there's not going to be any context. Media doesn't care about context. So you can't do that. You can't destroy human beings by putting out the files, whatever they may be.
It could just simply be that Jeffrey Epstein used blackmail to advance his career, and that's how his career started right at the very beginning. It seems fairly obvious that there was some intelligence agency involved. But even without that, Trump saying, according to Bill O'Reilly here, that a bunch of innocent people's lives will be ruined. Okay, but if there's an intelligence agency involved as well, that is who is using the blackmail material to extort behavior out of powerful elite people. Well, that looks really bad, right? That looks really bad. Also, you can no longer continue to blackmail them. So there's an enormous amount of value, they would say, lost in that. I'm kind of leaning towards that. Let's see. Okay. Oregon Conservative posted this, and I've said before, when Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were talking about this, it kind of felt like a hostage. It looked like a hostage situation. They did not seem normal.
And that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file.
You said
he looked sweatier there than normal, didn't he? He looked a little bit sweatier there. Now, we're still going to get to the rumors that he is going to resign, which are still rumors as of the beginning of this stream. Okay, let's get to that right now. So from Laura Loomer, Scoop, FBI Director Kash and Dan Bongino are livid with Attorney General Pam Bondi over her DOJ memo and the lack of transparency from her office regarding to the Jeffrey Epstein files. Well, saying the files are on my desk and then later saying, well, no, I was just talking about just generally files. Could have been files about anything. Source tells me that Dan Bongino is taking the day off today from his job as Deputy Director of the FBI. And there's now speculation on whether or not he will return to his job at the FBI over his disgust with Bondi's lack of transparency and handling of the Epstein files. She's calling her Pam Blondie. Pam Bondi has brought total embarrassment to President Trump, J.D. Vance, Dan Bongino, and Kash Patel. She has also lied to the American people. I'm told Kash and Bongino are furious with Bondi and the blowback she has caused them with her lack of transparency. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino should call for Bondi's public resignation today to save themselves and also to push for full transparency into the Epstein files. This is an issue the American people care deeply about. Someone needs to be fired for this. Giving Bondi courtesy to resign is more than she deserves. Trump should just fire her. Now, this goes on the assumption that she's not working on orders from Trump personally. And if what Bill O'Reilly is saying is true, then that sounds likely that she is working on orders from President Trump, who is saying that he doesn't want to destroy a bunch of innocent people's lives. But there can be other motivations on top of that, which we've already discussed. So here's what I think is plausible. So Jeffrey Epstein met a powerful a powerful financier in Ellen Greenberg, chief executive officer of Bear Stearns. They became friends. They might have had a similar interest in young women. This may be where the blackmail began, because then he had a very, very unlikely rise through the ranks in the financial world. I would say it would be very, very rare for somebody with no experience to rise as high as he did in just a few short years. Then he was identified as being valuable to an intelligence agency, recruited into that, began doing a lot of work for the government, and collecting blackmail material for the government. He had this media room in his New York mansion with a bunch of men in it watching the screens. Again, that doesn't sound like, I just don't believe that if you just wanted to perv out on women in the bathroom or in bedrooms or people in those places, that he'd hire people to monitor all the cameras in a secret room with a hidden door. No, that sounds like that's right out of a spy movie, is it not? His own personal proclivities ended up undermining him and getting him in trouble at lower levels of law enforcement, with an intelligence agency, with the government having to basically bail him out, not just of abuse charges, but also financial crimes as well. And it ended up getting out of the intelligence services grasp and control. And then eventually he just had to be removed. And now there is all of this information, all of these tapes, and the judgment is that it would cause too much damage, too much chaos to release it. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying this is my read on what is plausible. And that may not be true. And I could have some things wrong, but clearly there was blackmail involved, and clearly he was working with the government. I think that's these are just known facts. These are just demonstrably true at this point. So it's an outrage for the same reason that social justice is an outrage. It's not justice, right? This isn't justice. This isn't, everybody is equal before the law. This is the elites are protected for whatever reason, even if it's because this would cause a collapse, even if this would cause so much destruction, right? In politics and banking and whatever, right? Still, it's not justice. It's not justice. It's not everybody gets treated the same way in the eyes of the law. This isn't justice is blind. That's the outrage. This is not just some bloodlust, it's some just inherent desire for conspiracy and to be angry at shadowy figures. No. We know there's a problem here. We know there are crimes committed, and it is either everybody is equal in the eyes of the law or they're not. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Please like, share, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps me out. I thank you for that. I will see you next time.